What's going on, everybody? It's Timotheos bringing you another mixing tutorial. Actually, this should be the first one, so bringing you the first ever mixing tutorial. Oh, snap. Well, yesterday I stumbled upon the Universal Audio website, went to the manual section, and just started popping open a few manuals for some of their plugins, and I came across the API 2500 Bus Compressor. And, I've used it a lot and have never been able to get it to sound right until now. So, I'm going to show you some of the things I found out, something that makes it unique. And yeah, so I tried it on a couple of sources last night and felt like I got a good feel for it and really, really like it. I mean, API, punch, there's just drums, just definition, things that you think of when you hear that company and what it does and what it's supposed to do. So, yeah, I believe it. I'm a believer now. I've been converted. And watch out, SSL. Anyways, so we're going to take a look at a few things going on here. So, first thing we're going to do is obviously go over to Mr. Ableton. Alright, so really quick, I forgot to mention this. I made this beat yesterday. Judge how you want it. I think it's a fun beat. I had a lot of fun making it. What we're going to do is we're going to go through some settings on the API. I'm going to play the beat. I'm going to turn the 2500 on. We're going to throw some settings on. We're going to try and find what sounds good and what gets me moving. Okay, so that's what you're about to watch. Thank you. Yeah, so we're going to open it back up and go through a few of these parameters. So first things first, obviously the threshold. You can set the threshold to get the sound of compression first. So typically, if I just want to hear what the compressor is doing, I will just drag the threshold down and just start to get a feel for how it's affecting the signal. Next thing, a pretty standard bus compressor setting based on the SSL, the classic snake eyes, is attack at 30, release at 100. And so that's always a great place to start. Ratio at 4, pretty standard. And then, as you saw earlier, just tickling the needle. So I think that's easily one of the best ways to start. And that's going to be your punch setting. All right, so again, that's attack at 30, ratio at 4, and release at 100. Now I had mine set to 200, and this is in milliseconds, so that just felt right to me. I could have played with it more and seen if something felt better or worse or different, but I've trusted myself on just going with the feeling of how it's affecting me. So that's what it gave me, it gave me the feeling at this setting here. Now, the next thing is the threshold knee. Obviously, you have soft, medium, and hard, and the knee is about how quickly the compressor compresses and how hard it transitions from uncompressed into compressed signals. And, one of the best ways to hear it is cranking that compressor up, that threshold down, watch the needle move, slam it, and change the settings. And hard just felt right to me. Before I started, I did go through some of these settings. And even in the manual, it does say hard is a pretty good place to start. Now, the next part that always confused me is the detector thrust. And so what this is kind of like a side chain. However, instead of having a high pass, you're essentially doing a tilt EQ. And now what that's going to look like, if we go to Pro Q4 here, we're going to hit a tilt EQ, and you can go to shape, flat tilt, and this is essentially what it's doing with the compressor. And so I don't know the exact point at where it's tilting, but I do know that what it's doing is, bass frequencies affect a compressor a lot easier than higher frequencies, treble frequencies. And so when you have it at this higher thrust right here, it's going to smooth out the response from the bass to the high frequencies. And so the compressor is actually hitting the material at a more constant speed like this, where it's reacting to everything equally on the high and the low frequencies. Whereas if it were to respond to a signal, it would actually look more lopsided. It would respond to these frequencies and the bass frequencies first, and it might not actually compress anything over here. And so you're just getting that compression in the low frequencies. And so having the thrust like this gives us what's going to look closer to a flat response as far as how the compressor engages based on the frequencies you're feeding it, if that makes any sense. And so the medium curve on the API manual, I'm going to get a slope here. I'm going to hit this and get a high slope just like this. And there's going to be images on the manual, but essentially is a rough edit here. This isn't exact. This is just me drawing what it's going to look like. The medium right here, switching here, will look like this. It dips the bass response, it's steady in the middle, and then it increases the high frequencies, so that way you're responding a little bit easier to hear. You might have something in the middle, and then in the low frequencies, it's lessening the detection. And so you should really, once again, crank the compressor, go and figure out what works. If you have a vocal or you have something that isn't as bass heavy, like maybe an acoustic track that's just a singer and an instrument like an acoustic guitar or some strings or something, you might keep it at normal. But for this, I have a heavy hitting kick, and the bass line is kind of the groove of this track, so loud to me sounded the best. And then the tone type, feedback and feed forwards. Now those two types of compression alone require their own video, but essentially I flipped through these as I was listening to this material and found that the old allowed the full frequency response of the song to play back a little bit better to me, and so we'll just do a quick example of that. As you can see, the bass pops out a lot. It just overall has such a better vibe, and that's my opinion on it. It does go into the manual a little more specifically. Obviously, new is going to have a lot more modern feel to it. That was one of the things it touched on, and old is going to be a little bit more vintage as far as the sound goes. Now, I'm not doing this just on a drum kit. I haven't panned anything in this beat, so it's probably mostly mono sounds unless some of these sounds have stereo components built into them. But the stereo link, if you put it on individual like this, it's going to compress the left and the right side independently. So if I have a crazy hi-hat on the right side and a bass pan for some reason on the left side, it's going to attenuate those separately via these VU meters here, and you can shape the filter. So if I want the high pass and the low pass, then you can do that as well. But I'm going to link it because that's not what I'm trying to do. Most of the time you're probably going to want it linked unless, again, you're on a drum bus and you have a hi-hat panned and something else is panned. Things are all over the stereo image. So another part that I do want to touch on that I think is an incredible feature on this is this makeup gain right here. So if this makeup gain is enabled right here, meaning the red light is on, it is manual makeup gain. So no matter how high I crank it, it's going to follow that response, and I typically like to find a nice balance because you can hear it pump, and if you turn the makeup gain on any compressor, that pumping will sort of disappear if you can match the level appropriately. And typically, as a guide, when you're on the gain reduction view for the VU meters, whatever the needle is hitting here, if it's going to 3, then I'll put it up to 3, and that's a pretty easy way to match it. Sometimes it's a little less. Sometimes if it just needs to be a little louder, I'll push it up just a bit. And you can get a pretty good beef sound from this just by cranking the output up a little bit. I do know in the Capital mastering compressor, there's actually a separate, like, mild clipper in the output meter that distorts, saturates sweetly. And I honestly tried that same trick on this compressor and found that it does have a little bit of mojo going with it. So cranking that output knob, cranking the compressor, and then smacking it at 50% of the mix was also an amazing way to use this. So when you deactivate the makeup gain, it is now in its automatic gain match function. So no matter how much I compress, it's going to gain match it. So there isn't this loss in volume. And that's a great thing to do when just trying to set an easy setting, get the sound, and go. And if you do want a little more control, you can enable the makeup gain just like that. And now this bypass button here is a soft bypass. And that soft bypass is bypassing the compressor, but it's keeping all the circuitry active, meaning all the tone and mojo that just having this plug-in on here invokes, it's going to keep that. And I would definitely go back and forth on the new and the old. I'd crank some of the input gain going into it and crank the output and see what kind of sounds you can get. And, you can distort it and then mix it back from how you like it. So those are a few things about this compressor that I learned that made it different for me and that made me understand it a lot better. So these were the settings that worked on this. I'm going to try it on another piece of material here, and that's going to be on this song that I made. And let's see. I'm going to start it in the middle. Alright, so what we're going to do is we're going to crank it. We're going to listen to the compression. I'm going to start with the attack all the way fast, the release all the way fast, and the ratio at its max, actually. And we're keeping all these settings exactly as they are. I'm turning the makeup gain off, so it's going to do its own thing. It's going to calibrate on its own, and we're just going to find the right setting for this. And this is also bass heavy, so I'm keeping the thrust at where it is. Wasn't that something? So you kind of saw how I calibrated it. So when you start with the fastest attack and release on a compressor, you throw the threshold all the way to its max, you bring the ratio all the way to its max. It's very easy to hear what the compressor is doing. And so that's one of the ways I like to start to calibrate it. When I first learned, that was how I calibrated the compressors. You can start to get a feel for them a little bit better. And I do believe we're going to go back a couple settings here. Yeah, so I had it at 10. That's where I felt the right punch. 30 let a little bit too much of the transient through. So maybe you can go back and listen to that. But 30 let a little too much transient through. The 0.3 milliseconds was really close. It was sharp, but I got a little bit more of that punch I was looking for. Again, with the 4 ratio, 100 milliseconds on the release was nice. I was getting some sweet kind of glue in those later settings. So 10 and 100, great choice for this. The variable release obviously lets you get to specifically choose a release characteristic rather than these fixed points. And that's just something you can start to kind of drag and feel for, but I didn't do that. As well, another thing I want to point out with bus compressors is you really have two options, and these are sort of how I think about it, is you either have the punch or you have the glue. And the punch is a setting just like this, 10 and 100 on the attack and release respectively, maybe 30 and maybe 200, but a faster release time, a slower attack time, that's your punch right there. And again, the old, it was doing something to the low mids. My voice is deep. The song, it's pretty thin, but it brought out that low mid in the song that I wanted. And when I went to new, it was brighter. It didn't have what I wanted. And when I switched back to old, it was just perfect. So what I was saying was, the glue settings for a compressor is you can keep this slow of an attack, you can go even slower, and then go to the slowest release possible. You can try 1 or 2 seconds, but I'm going to go variable 3 seconds, and we're going to configure this here. And the needle should be pinned. There's going to be a little bit of fluctuation, but this glue is just going to keep everything in transition from the chorus to the verse. And if you can look at this waveform, there's a pretty big difference in when that bass comes in. There's no 808 at all. The drums stop, everything's dry, and it jumps into heavy 808. And we're going to try and get this glue to fit with that transition right there. So let's see what we can do. It's all in my head. God damn it, I keep on falling again, 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 and again. Fuck it, I broke it again. You fall, it's all in my head. God damn it, I keep There you go. I mean, it works every time. And these glue settings are perfect for hitting it a little heavier. You know, you saw that the needle was more closer to 7 and 10 even, but it's keeping everything weighed down. And this is a Ken Lewis trick. He's an amazing mixer, heavily accoladed, and he does this with the Manley Very an amazing trick. It works on a lot of other compressors just like that, but it just has a trick. It does that trick, it works, and that's it. And that's all you can really ask for. And when you know those things, you can start there and actually end up finding a really good setting easily because you know what to look for. You know what it should sound like, and you can get a feel for it. And once your head starts moving, once you start getting in the groove and feeling the music, just take your hands off the computer, off the mouse, wherever it is, off the board, whatever you have, just take your hands off and just vibe for a second. Because you're going to over tweak it. You're going to think there's a better setting. You're going to think that something is better than what you have, and it's not. So what I'm saying is you're going to find that vibe and you're going to stick to it. All right. So I appreciate everybody for sticking it out this far. I'm going to conclude the video here. Stay tuned for more. Leave a comment. Let me know your thoughts. Let me know if I can improve anything or what you liked about the video. And yeah, what's your favorite bus compressor? Thank you guys very much. It's Timotheos Music. I'm out.